Wastewater Support Committee meeting for Thursday, September 27th, 2018 to order. Thank you all for coming. First topic on our agenda is the Homeowners Sewer Connection Guidebook. Noreen, do you want to give us some update on the last week or so?
Okay. We continue to edit, and shockingly enough, I continue to find small, tiny typos and things, but as of, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, and Dan is the controller of the document, so there wouldn't be confusion about which version or anything like that.
He keeps the Oxford commas.
That's right, that's right, yeah, they're in his power. So he sent them out, and Peter, I guess, distributed them per regulations. So this is the version we're looking at, which has not been printed, is the one that we would be proposing for a limited printing to have some things to give out at next Wednesday's informational meeting. So the proposal is that it would probably just be 100 copies of each, the 2-pager and the booklet, and that's all set up to go in tomorrow morning. So since the other members have seen this, I would make a motion that this version that was distributed to you by Acting Chair Peter Hughes would be approved with the understanding, approved by this committee with the understanding that it's a living document, so there will continue to be changes as new information becomes available. And I don't think we would vote on each, typo or word from this point on. So I move that the version that has been sent to you be approved by the committee for a limited printing at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that.
Okay, it's moved and seconded that we approved the document called the Homeowner Sewer Connection Guidebook and the 5-step document for limited production. I would just note that the document as it exists today, as presented to us and sent to you, this is the document, by the way, it does have on basically each page approved by WSC, and that's today's date. So that was in anticipation of approving it tonight. Not to usurp anybody's vote or anything, but that was, we wanted to have it so it was in the position where, or in the situation where it's ready to go tomorrow to get printed for this limited production run. So,
I have a question. Is it dated on each page, or is it dated visibly? Because I think that's been the problem with past documents. It is.
Got it. There, yeah. Except for the cover.
That's fine.
Right, it starts on the first page, and the 2-pager is not dated.
And every attachment in the addendum is the same way. So we did that to make sure, number one, as we go forward, if something changes, whether you got a sheet that's good, bad, or indifferent. So.
It also made a difference when we posted it on the website. It was a tremendous challenge to Sandy to figure out which one was the most up-to-date.
And now, as soon as we vote this, it'll get locked down until we get to the next version, whatever happens next. Okay, any further discussion on that?
Well, only that, I'm not really clear with this is going to be evolving, how often we do have to vote, or, I can't imagine we're voting every time we add a word or a line, or do we just let it play out?
My opinion, it's a living document, but you let it, we don't touch it for another 3 months, or at least see what happens. If something else comes up that has to be given out, it could be given out as a separate item of some sheet of paper or something, but at some point when this committee decides appropriate to run a new edition of it, or edit it, then we will.
Okay.
Also, I think if something really significant, an incorrect or major change in it, we can always add a single-page addendum.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the, if it's a very limited.
And we could find that when the 50% or 90% design is done, maybe there's some information there we want to pass out to people. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay. Any further discussion, Larry?
Very quickly, I want to protect my fellow selectmen. Ed McManus raised a question on the sewer diagram. Did you confirm that, who's right on that?
I will say this. What he recommended is the way they do it in California. We're not in California. So we ran that by the water superintendent.
Okay.
And the diagram stays the way it is.
In case it comes back again, I'll be sure that was checked.
That's the way it is. Not meant to be an engineering drawing, it's just meant to be illustrative of what the segments are called and what you do. Okay, any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote, thank you. A lot of hard work on everybody's part, and I certainly appreciate that, and I think it will be very helpful. So now going forward, you're gonna work with Evan, and he's gonna get 100 copies of each made, right?
And I'm going to squirrel aside a small supply so the committee has some, and so that we have at least a dozen or so for future occasions. And in addition, I'll write to Caleb in the morning, or Dan will, whichever way it falls, so that he can update the websites, all the websites with the more current version.
Okay. All right, anybody else on that topic? We're good, all right. So next is monthly report of Board of Selectmen's meeting tentative for October 15th. I reported to the board a week ago Monday, and basically talked about this, talked about the county loan program, and talked a little bit about grinder pumps, is where we were at that point. So I don't know what topics, maybe you have one, Larry, or whatever, that you'd like us to talk about at the next meeting, or next opportunity, or Chris.
I really haven't thought about it too much, but I think just an update, your feedback from the guide that you're getting, I think is good. I think it will also, at that point, have the October 3rd meeting. You can get some feedback on that. As I mentioned, well, we're going to start I've asked CDM Smith to start the October 3rd meeting an hour early with the Hardin Lane folks on their concerns about pressure, so that may be an update. By then, maybe there'll be some more information on the situation and planning on that. And that'd be enough. I think you're better off keeping it rather short at this point.
Okay.
I'll just mention that we aren't meeting between now and that meeting.
Right, other than the 3rd, which is.
Right, that's the 3rd.
Yep.
But in the presentation, you might want to mention, I just got a communication today, people are continuing to ask about, not so much the financial assistance this week, but about the loan issue and different interest structures. So even if you can just mention to keep it in front of them that people in phase 2 continue to ask for the town to address their loan needs and financial assistance needs.
Okay, and certainly by that time, that'll be just about the time 90% design is available, right? And so, take the issue of grinder pumps and Hardin Lane and whatnot, I think that there'll be some better definition by that point in time, certainly as to what's gonna happen there.
I'll come up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit down, it's been a long day.
It's okay. If I had a beer, I'd give you one, but you don't have one, sorry.
So just on the, a couple things on the funding. I will set up a meeting with John Giorgio at the session that you were at. I think John Giorgio was there, and I know we had one discussion about the financial assistance, and he didn't have any creative ideas at that point. He obviously had thought about it a little bit more. So he had suggested at the selectmen's meeting that he had some thoughts. So I will, it's on my to-do list, set up a meeting with him and find out what that thought is.
Right, I just didn't understand, he did or he didn't, I thought at the meeting he said.
He did have some ideas
Right.
beyond our initial, I had an initial meeting with him when you
I
brought
see.
it up probably 3
Yeah.
months ago,
Very
and
good.
he didn't have any creative
I
ideas.
see, because he mentioned it that night.
But sometimes you have a topic and then people start stewing on it and then they come up with,
Right.
some thoughts.
But just to be clear about what I just said, the issues this week were not about financial assistance, they're about loans and interest. People looking for the town to provide perhaps loans directly, or some other mechanism, kind of maybe like the old, remember the MWPAT, was it, that worked through towns? Quabbin, was that way back? I'm not
Goes
sure.
way back.
I know, so do I.
I recall the acronym, but I don't recall the
Right.
details.
But at any rate, just to be clear, that this wasn't the financial assistance for lower income people, this was the issue of lower interest for everybody.
And I would say, I did go down to Sugar Hill and had a discussion with, with folks, and several folks did approach me at that meeting. And that's really what prompted the October 3rd, just in terms of that. I got invited to like 2 additional meetings, and I thought, I can't be out every night doing this, so maybe we just
Sure.
group some of these together. That's what really prompted the October 3rd. But I know at least 2 or 3 people from that session came in to talk to the assessors about what the capabilities are of some of our programs. So it did have a positive where people are picking up on that and doing it. On Hardin Lane, I do have initially, I think, good news here. I did have an opportunity to talk to Mike Judici from CDM. They are looking at doing I feel like a salesman for E1. I keep referring to E1, it's the only one I really know, but the small pump station, that they do have an oversized unit that probably could do 6 homes that are on that. So we are looking at having a small pump station. They have one in Chatham, so this would be a little bigger version. I think there's 2 or 3 homes in Chatham that are plugged into that one. So we are looking to see if we can do one that would be for 6.
This thing just go in the ground, or is it
Yeah,
some,
Yeah, it's basically a holding tank with then the
Yeah,
pump.
okay.
It's almost flush mounted too to the surface. It has a pretty low profile in terms of that, it's probably safe to say. So we are looking at that, so they would feed in gravity and then come down and then it would get pumped up. So that's the theory behind that. I don't know if you wanted me to just run off with a whole bunch of different things and give you an update, or how you wanna, if you
yeah,
want.
okay, well, just hang on a second. So I think we have enough, I think that will be Sharon at that point in time, but there'll be enough things that she can talk about to update the board. So, and did you have something? I thought you had put your hand up.
When you asked about what to present at the Monday night meeting, you might want to mention that this is available.
Oh, we'll have these available to be passed out, I think, at that.
No, but won't it be on the website?
Yeah, we'll be on the website.
So just mentioning it.
Yeah, okay. We'll reinforce that, I guess, because when I
Yes.
presented to them last time, they had copies of this, not this version of it, an earlier version, plus we told them that we had put it up on the website, and that we're entertaining comments until last Friday or something like that. We had a cutoff date, so. And that did lead to some discussion, like who else has seen it and those kinds of things. But anyhow, I will also tell you, just while I mention it, that I sent this off in this form to the chairman of the Board of Health, just to close
Okay.
that loop, and suggested that as they have comments or things to add, that they get back to us. So Chris, why don't you go if you want to, give us.
Sure. I think a few things that have come out from the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We did have the special legislation for DHY. The Board of Selectmen did vote that 4-1. So that is moving that forward. Dennis had previously voted it. We've now voted it. I think Yarmouth is scheduled to vote it maybe this week. Or maybe they voted it this week. So I know it's on their docket coming up. So that special legislation will go forward, assuming a favorable vote in Yarmouth, and I just don't have the update from Yarmouth.
And so do we anticipate, let's say it moves forward, that we get an answer by first quarter of next year, or?
Yeah, there's 2 potential tracks that could take, as I understand it. It is special legislation, and provided that no one has an issue with it, then it could be adopted between now and the end of the session, which I think is in January, beginning of January. I think they found out that the Foxborough, the MFN one, was done that way, off session, or I don't remember the exact term for it, but basically out of session. The only risk is that if any one of the legislators has an issue with it, then it has to go to, so I don't think in a local initiative that there really would be that much opposition to it. So I think there is a chance. If for some reason it doesn't make it to the floor, then it would have to kind of start the process in January, so that would delay. I think the favorable thing in terms of this is now that the legislation allows for the creation of the partnership, the work has to commence on actually forming the documents to put the partnership together. And that's what's going to be for town meeting. So there's a lot of details that I think are in that that need to be worked out and vetted through. We do meet over in Dennis on Friday mornings is when those meetings occur. So I think we're going to try to have a second selectman. Did they appoint a second?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Supposed to be on the agenda for Monday.
So each community has two, similar to what we did
Yep.
with the IMA in Chatham. So we need to have a second one from the town of Harwich. Larry.
Lorraine, do you have a question?
Yeah, one thing from the presentation wasn't clear to me. John Giorgio was very explicit about that unless every selectman signed the agreement, and then, of course, it went to town meeting, but I thought he said every single selectman had to sign the agreement.
No, I think what he indicated, I don't think it has to be a unanimous vote of the board.
That's
I think what he said was it needs to be approved by the board before it gets on for a warrant for town meeting, so that the selectmen have, this isn't done by any stretch. So once the subcommittee or the subgroup works and does their work, similar to what we did with the IMA,
Yeah.
and then bring it back to the whole board still needs to adopt it, and then it still needs to go to town meeting.
What I
It's
think he
still a
meant
fair
to
amount
say
of
was each board had to sign it. In other words,
Each of the three.
Each of the three boards of
Right.
selectmen had
Yes.
to sign it, basically adopt it,
That's right.
as long as the
Yeah,
3 to 2
I think
vote.
from a political aspect, Representative Wayland has said that he's got the legislation ready to file, but he didn't want to, he told us he wasn't going to go ahead with that until each of the 3 towns approved it, because he didn't want to he didn't want to go forward and then find out he didn't have full support from the 3
Sure.
communities.
Okay.
He didn't need a majority, he didn't need everyone in each town, but he needed the 3 towns.
Good.
And then just on the construction side itself, I have been engaged more fully in the easements. So I've gone out to the different locations for the pump stations. There were 6 pump stations, there still are 6 pump stations, but 6 of them were contemplated to be on private property. We have moved 2 of those to public property to try to avoid some of the cost factors that go into this. We have reached out, and those ones that have been moved were ones in which the resident wasn't as willing to potentially work with the town. And then also, I think I have on my desk that on the 15 private ways, there will be a order of taking, that may not be the exact right word for that, but basically an order of taking, which would allow the town to go on to those private ways. One thing that's interesting is that the Board of Selectmen acting as sewer commissioners don't need to go to town meeting to take property. So in order to make sure, one of the things that we're shooting for is that when the application goes in on October 15th, that we have to show the ownership, or that we're well underway to having ownership over the full system. So the 6 pump stations and the 8 miles of pipe all have to be kind of accounted for. So KP Law has done the order of taking document for the public ways. I have reached out, actually sent letters out the beginning of this week. The other 2, we have 2 cross-country connections or paths that we have to go through, 400 East and Stop and Shop Plaza. So we have letters going out. I just recently got the diagrams that actually show the easement itself that we would need to effectuate that. So in terms of that status, and I think the borings are still going on. They
Yeah.
have not concluded the boring work yet, and borings are the machine that actually digs in the ground. I always think when I say that, people are gonna say, what are you talking about, boring? It's not boring, it's borings in terms of getting dirt and finding out the soil profile.
On
Good
the
question.
Yeah, on the easements. So were you able to piggyback on the water utility easements on the private ways? Or in fact, did you have to take the private ways?
I actually just got the material, so I haven't had a chance to fully look at it, but I think that the recommendation of KP was, the water department did provide all the water easements, but it's not unusual for the attorneys to kind of advise that when you do an order of taking, it clears any issues up. So
Okay.
if there was any questionable elements, we would clear it up.
So if in fact it goes that way, does that change the status of those roads in any way in terms of plowing, liability, anything?
All what it allows us to do is put pipe in the ground and operate a pipe.
So it's like a limited easement?
Yeah,
Or-
it's actually a utility easement.
Oh, it is a
Just a
utility
user,
easement.
yeah, in essence, it's a utility easement.
Okay.
It's what, 20
But
feet?
just to be clear, though, once you put the pipe in the ground on a private way, the street gets repaired, right?
Yeah, I believe that the standard we're using is not too dissimilar to what Chatham did in their project. So if it was a dirt road to begin, it's a dirt road after. So I don't
right.
want to create a misconception that we're going to pave all the streets.
Right.
If it was a paved road, we will return it to its, existing status prior to the work.
Would a private road, would it make any sense for folks to consider turning the roads over to the town at that point, since it's gonna be resurfaced anyhow? I mean, you might get some that say, hey, it's about time, maybe we should do it.
Well, you were on the board.
Yeah.
As I remember it, the Board of Selectmen has a moratorium on accepting any public ways. And that moratorium, I think, has been around 2002?
I know.
It's been around a long time, and it hasn't been overturned in the
I
time
know.
I've been here.
You could find some in this case, if you get 20 roads, maybe some will wanna do it. I don't know.
Isn't part of the problem the width of the road
Uh-huh.
and all other things
Yeah.
have to kick
They have
in?
to come up to
once you-
standard, yep, no doubt about it, drainage, everything. So, okay, anything else on those topics?
No, I do have, just on the meeting on October 3rd, I have a preliminary schedule that CDM put together, so I'd like
Okay.
to kind of pass that out.
Yep.
If there's anything you want, I was going to try to respond to him tomorrow to add elements in.
Do you have copies of that?
Yeah.
Or- And it's still my understanding that Megan will be setting up for the health
Absolutely.
department a couple workstations or whatever, so people can look at their records, if you will.
So Dan and Megan will be in attendance to answer questions.
What time's it start? It's an hour before. What time? is it?
6 o'clock.
So it's 5 for the other group, or 6 o'clock for the other? This is
5 for the hard lane.
5, okay.
And it is at the cultural center, right?
Cultural Center, yeah, I catch myself. We have the names pretty close,
You
cultural.
just gotta be
yeah.
careful.
So who's doing these activities?
I think we were gonna have, when I did the, I did the, kind of the lead-in on the one down at the Sugar Hill. So I was gonna kind of do kind of an overview, and then probably turn it over to CDM, Megan, and Dan to do their specific components of it. I thought the discussion down at Sugar Hill, just, it was in someone's home, probably had about 30 to 35 people in there. And I thought it was pretty good to have kind of a free flow of discussion. I was surprised, I had asked, do you want me to start at the beginning? And I did have some people say, yeah, why are we doing this? So I did take a little bit of time just to go through the Conservation Law Foundation and the litigation and the need to do it. And then we really got into different areas.
Yeah, it does point out that no matter how much we talk about it, and as time goes on, you still run into people
We're
that,
still gonna run.
it's like, I just heard about this yesterday. Problem is, we all get too close to it, so.
650 properties, so. I mean,
Yeah, we can't,
chance of
we
everyone
can't
being
assume
plugged
that
in
they
is
all know
not-
about it, so,
And
I mean,
just so folks know, this committee will be skipping its Tuesday meeting. But I did post for the Wednesday meeting just to cover us, so we're all set, whoever shows up.
okay, and so there'll be 100 copies of these documents available, to, people, everybody
Yeah,
should
if you
get
can
one.
get those to me so I can start getting.
Evan's gonna print them, right, or get them
Yeah.
printed, so,
Yeah, I'll talk to Evan in the morning.
okay? Anything else on that?
Yes.
By the way, who can attend here? I cannot, so, and I think
I'll be
Sharon
there.
will be there. You'll be there? You guys
I
be-
think I can too.
Okay.
I think I can.
Okay, all right,
And
good.
do you want to have a role on the stage, or do you want to just be acknowledged, or, what's your
What I'd
thought?
suggest is, why don't you acknowledge the committee, Sharon, the chair, blah, blah, and the members. And then, as questions or comments come up, I think that the members can react as they need to. I mean, I think most people are gonna be there to hear CDM Smith and you and understand where we are in the design process and ask their questions, so,
Do
yeah.
you think we should just go around and give out the brochures or park ourselves at a table?
I
or-
think everybody walks in the door should be given one of each of these.
Okay.
So, if you guys get there a little bit early, you might wanna help the Board of Health with their stuff,
Sure.
you know, Health Department. And, you know, there's basically two ways in there, so if you guys just split them up and make sure everybody gets one, or put them on the chairs, or whatever you wanna do, you know? And I'm sure during the introduction, someone will say, hey, the document's in front of you, you know, are you sitting on them?
I think people have appreciated having the document. I mean, I actually brought
they do.
several of the ones that we had for town meeting. I've been trying to use them up as we have them.
Yep.
They're still got a lot of
Yep.
good information in it. I think people do appreciate having it.
And maybe we can take, if there's a big crowd, as there sometimes has been lately, we can always take some emails. I'll bring a list, and we could, even though it's on the website, we could email them individually. I wouldn't
Sure.
mind doing that.
Sure. Okay. Anything else on that topic? Can we talk about the communication coordinator, the RFP? No response, right?
Yeah, no response. I have had just a very, very quick discussion with the chair. Prior to, or I shouldn't say prior to, when I first arrived, there was always in the capital budget, $100,000 in there for CDM to kind of help with the going, forward, to kind of get the approvals for the CWMP and so forth. And, one of the things I was thinking about is, we may not have gotten a lot of response because the amount of money and people, I think that having an appropriation of $100,000, which was kind of the number that we had used before, to see if we can draw, some interest in having somebody come in. So I am contemplating putting forth at least a capital budget request for $100,000 for the same communication coordinator service, to see if that would engender some additional.
But that would be next fiscal year.
Start next fiscal year. I think the positive of doing that, well, number one, I gotta make sure there's money in the budget to fund it, and I haven't committed to that piece. I haven't got all the capital in yet. But if we were to have it in, then we could, say to people this year, at the end of this fiscal year, if we have 20,000, that, we'll start up a little early if we have money from this year to be able to start up. So we could conceivably start up potentially a little bit early to get going on it.
And for the $100,000, you think that's still a communication coordinator as opposed to a project manager, or?
Yeah, I think it's worth having a discussion. I think it's worth having the discussion to see what role we want to have. I know the chair is kind of indicated probably more project manager or kind of a clerk of the works, someone to advocate specifically for the town and for the residents, that type of position. And certainly you guys have put a lot of effort into the communications coordinator. If it's a hybrid of those two, I'm kind of open, but I think it'd be good to at least, I'd like to create a holding spot in the capital plan.
Yeah, no,
so
I
at least
understand
we have
that
some
part of it, yeah.
discussion with it.
But it's different skill sets, I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I
Or you may want to take that job.
don't think
Yes,
so.
I want to take that job.
No, I was gonna touch on what Peter said. I hate to lose the whole year, and have the project get out ahead of us. Let me ask Chris, years ago, we used some money out of engineering services, and I think I did inquire of Carol before your time.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if there is any excess money. I haven't been able to get a detailed copy of the budget this year. So I don't know if there's any money in there, but I just hate to wait till May for the whole thing, whatever it is. We could really use a database of the names. There's so much groundwork that could be done, so I guess I'll just leave it there for now. But, to start to go out, if you put it in the budget, it wouldn't be available to July 1st, so even if somebody hit the ground July 1st, that's it's practically a whole year away, so just something for thought.
Yeah, I do think as things are kind of unfolding too, and we'll get a better sense for this, after October 15th, we submit the project to the state. We then have to also submit the plans to Concom and other boards. I think that there's a hope that we could start doing some construction in the spring. If we miss the spring and get into summer, then you're probably gonna see it in the fall. So going in July may not
but
be
that's-
too late, but.
That's not really my point. It's more to the fact that by the time we get to phase 3, 80% of these questions will be answered. We'll know if we're gonna have professional engineers or sanitarians. We'll know if it's gonna be one or two. So many things that are taking up our time now are not gonna exist. So, I feel we need the help in the winter to do the prep, even if it was temporary help or part-time help or something like that, rather than to let it wait for somebody to walk in July 1st. That's just my view. And I think there are money elsewhere, and in the past, we've paid CDM Smith's costs out of reserve fund transfers, and I have a list of those specific times that those were approved. So there certainly are funds available.
I think there's possibility. The concern I have, quite honestly, is we did the RFP and we got nobody.
Right, and that did not have a dollar amount in it, correct?
Yeah, we did not do the dollar
Right,
amount.
right.
But, I can't,
Right.
there's not much I can do if I can't.
No, I know, I'm just saying, I'm not gonna accept that it's a foregone conclusion that it goes till next
Let me ask
July.
a question. So in the RP we sent out that nobody responded to, do we have a clear scope of work and a clear list of
Sure
deliverables?
scope of work, so.
No, I know, but I mean, have a clear
Almost
list of
clear.
deliverables? Did it have deliverables in it?
I haven't.
Maybe what we need to do is take an action to revisit that,
Right.
make it stronger, if you will, and see it, because it could be two different people or two different
That's right.
organizations that respond to this. You know.
I guess I just kind of open up the discussion of, I will put it in the capital budget and then see if we can, if we have time to do some, or
Yeah.
you guys have
Yeah.
some time to do some legwork on it and see. But yeah, going for a reserve fund transfer is not out of the question. But we just need to get the scope right and get a
And
get a
someone wanting to
contract.
do the work, so we can revisit it.
It was loosely defined.
Yeah, okay, so maybe we should tighten that, maybe we should put on an agenda, an item that revisits that.
Mhm.
Tries to tighten it up with what we know now, and see if we can come up with something, okay? And then maybe our goal is to have something, by the end of the year that we're able to pass off and say, okay, let's go advertise this and see if, we can get someone to do it. Ideally, someone would be sort of touching all 650 properties with this stuff as a minimum, and, et cetera, so.
I noticed that Cape Light Compact just announced a new person taking over an outreach position for them, and apparently that person had come from AmeriCorps. I wonder if in the process, I don't know if it was somebody they had or if they recruited or whatever, but I didn't know if anybody could touch base with them just to see what it's still a utility outreach person.
So CVAC?
No, Cape Light
Oh, Cape
Compact.
Like
sorry.
compact. You say it was someone that worked at AmeriCorps.
Yes.
That's a
Good-
new hire.
Good training
A
ground.
new hire for them?
If you want, I'll forward you it's just it was in their,
That'd be fine.
it was in their monthly newsletter, it wasn't anything, inside.
Okay? And then, the last time on the topics for discussion, the Colebrook attenuation project, we set a date to take a field trip, if you will. I think I sent that to everybody.
Yes.
Someone had a date in front of them. It was
Not with
like the 29th or something like that.
Yeah, I do believe that Mike Lack's group is going to do a walkthrough of that site.
Yeah, no, he set it up in coordination with me.
Okay, with you.
With
okay.
this group, and he invited the guy from DEP or whatever, and I think, you and your team, whatever. So that's how they came about.
What was the date on that again?
I'm gonna find out.
October 30th, at
Is
9 o'clock.
that Halloween?
No, it's not,
9 AM at the old fire station on Bank Street,
the 30th.
I'll put that on my calendar.
rain or shine.
That's your staff.
And by the way, you told me you don't have to wear boots, we're gonna walk, it's all sandy, so
Yeah,
it's
you
not,
could walk in there. I've been through this.
you don't have to wear your waders. I hope.
Rubber boots keep the ticks at bay.
Right, and there was a pretty good article in the Chronicle today about the project, so if you wanna get a little background on it or get up to speed on it, in the Chronicle today.
Okay, we did have,
Over.
Mike Lack had come in, and we do have two things that are going on with that. There is an agreement between our consultants, if you would, and the consultants for DER for what the configuration should look like. And now we have to establish, and I have engaged, I think I have a proposal coming in from CDM to engage them in how do we establish a partnership document with, this is a little bit tricky in terms of DER, which is the environmental resource people at the state, have a contract now with a firm, Interfloof, to go through, and they've done the feasibility work. So to have them do the design may make some sense, but it's not our land. This is one where it's kind of an interesting one, because this isn't us just doing a project. So we are being partners with people. So DER has a contract. Obviously, we have, now that we have an agreed upon design, how do we then partner up with them that we do nitrogen reduction, which is really the focal point of the town meeting appropriation, and have them do HCT and DER are more focused on fish passage and more focused on the aesthetics of the environment and creating a diverse a diverse environment for different critters to operate in. So we do have two different purposes. So we need to figure out the documentation. Is it an IMA? Is it a agreement with the state? So we're working through those details to try to get that, and then we'll bring that back to the board. But just to remind folks, probably for folks at home, right now the way the system is designed, because it was a former cranberry bog, it's very inefficient at removing nitrogen. And the most efficient way of removing nitrogen is through creating a living layer of mud at the bottom, a benthic layer, a living layer of bacteria and so on. So as natural nitrogen moves through that system, if it moves through slowly and in contacts with the surface enough, we can get a higher level of reduction. This is where I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I think if I remember right, the bog removes maybe like 10 to 15%. Having the system designed as a maximum nitrogen reduction system would remove closer to 50%, 50 to 55%, I believe are the numbers. And what that would do is, if that works, and really what we're going to show how it works is by setting up monitoring stations to see what is the nitrogen level coming in, what's the nitrogen level going out. The nice thing about this area is we have Bank Street has a defined culvert that it goes through, and then Hoyt Road. So we know where, it comes in two different areas. It comes on a bank, about 40% from Bank, 60% from the Lover's Lane area coming directly into the bogs, and then all of it going out at Hoyt Road. So we have to pick certain locations to be able to monitor that and make sure that if the theory is that it's 10 to 15% that is out by the bogs, and we're getting closer to 50 to 55% on the way out once the system is improved, that we could document that and show that. The value for the town in doing that is then we can avoid, I think it's about 200 homes having to be sewered in that area, and save potentially $6 million at the expense of potentially $2 million. So there is a real rhyme or reason to that. You guys pay me for a lot, but benthic layer and trying to understand all that stuff, biology I liked it, but it was a long time ago. So having these experts go through and understand that, what the value of doing that is key. And so far, we've only spent about $35,000 out of that $2 million. The big dollars will be on the design and the ultimate construction of reconfiguring the stream bed or the brook bed on how to do that, and then building the ponds.
So Chris, any idea what the timeline is for all that if things go well?
Yeah, I always want to do things quicker, but I do think on this that we will come up with a more detailed schedule. I think they're talking about, though, we haven't even got to kind of final design plans yet, so we have feasibility done. That will be done pretty quickly here, and then designing it out will take a period of time. And then really the question is how long will it take to get through the regulators? And, I was here for pretty much the start of Muddy Creek, and, I'm always fascinated at Muddy Creek that it took us 14 months to get regulatory approval to do it, and realistically, it took, I know we had 4 months, I think, in the construction. Realistically, it took about 2 months to construct that
Yeah.
bridge.
Yeah.
So timelines are really driven by the regulatory process.
Sure.
I do think the model that we used on Muddy Creek of inviting the regulators in early and letting them know what we're doing and why we're doing it made the process a little easier on the backside. And this time, I shouldn't stop picking on DOT, but DOT was one of the ones that really took a while to get through.
Sure.
And there is no DOT elements to this project, so DOT, Department of Transportation. I used too many of those too
I
quickly.
know it
but-
well.
Okay, any questions on that? And so we'll be walking in on October 3rd to get to know more about than you wanted to know.
October 30th.
October 30th, I'm sorry, not 3rd.
9
Thank
a.m.
you, thank you. Okay,
I have a question for Chris on
Sure.
a different topic.
all right.
Chris, I wrote to Carol, and she was gonna look into it, but there was one of the state grants that's due mid-month for $1 million that looked pretty straightforward, and it's from the sewer rate relief fund. Unfortunately, Larry just
He
watched.
just provided that to me.
Oh, okay.
So I
yeah.
will look at it.
Unfortunately, it just came out and it's due October 19th, but it does cover design and it does cover debt that's already been acquired, I believe, so it's,
Okay. Yeah, I most likely will send to CDM and just see what we have to do to kind of fill that out and see if we're eligible. I think the one thing, and I hadn't really focused on this, but just again for the opportunity for folks at home, that we are first on the list
Right.
for our project. And because we're a regional effort, Chatham is submitting separately from Harwich, but they're acknowledged as being one project, that we get credit for a regional project and it's nitrogen reduction. And, before I said that there's a possibility, and it's still just a possibility, but I think we're in a much better place of that possibility of it being zero.
right?
Yeah.
But if we can save $1 million,
Yep. We'll definitely look at it. He just
Right.
gave it to me too, so
Right.
I'll have to
Okay.
digest it.
Okay. All right, any
That's all.
questions and answers for anybody? You've been patient out there, do you have a?
I just was gonna talk about the guidebook, that's all. If you don't mind.
Okay,
please do.
thanks,
We're
Chris.
gonna talk about schedule before.
Thank you.
Are you all set with me?
Yeah, you can sit there, it'd be easier. Huh?
Just to identify myself again, I'm John Schneibel, Coastal Engineering. I am a sanitarian, by the way, so
Oh, good.
I think this is interesting that maybe sanitarians should be allowed to, we have like 10 professional engineers at the office, but one sanitarian, and it's me. So, anyway, though, I was reading that could be, again, that is interesting that could be a possibility. But I was mostly here about the sewer connection guidebook, which I thought, obviously had a ton of hard work in there, and it's well done. And I just wanted to talk about the importance for homeowners to have the design review prior to having the stub installation. We've been pushing that at some of our meetings that we had. And we're always looking at, better plan earlier than later. And again, in our experience with sewer connections in Chatham, that planning is important. A number of stub connections that were done that were already stubbed out, it made it more difficult, costly to install. And when we pre-planned on a couple of proposed stubs, particularly on 28 there at a couple of commercial properties, they were moved to a more advantageous location. It worked out pretty well in those cases. And then just on the pre-planning, we looked at the Harwich sewer plans, what we had, the 50% plans, and we looked at some of the locations and found like St. Peter's Church and the Sugar Hill subdivision. Both of them, the main only goes up to the property line and doesn't extend, like maybe to the middle of the lot on the street. So what happens there in those situations, that's gonna be a more expense for the homeowner or owner, like of St. Lutheran's Church there, just because now they're gonna have to, particularly in the church there, they're gonna have to go around and and actually go through some, what we think, some utility issues and so forth. So we're looking at, maybe talking to the
CDM Smith,
CDM Smith
Yep.
and saying, hey,
Yep.
kind of let's push that line.
sure.
And also at Sugar Hill, there's a couple at the dead ends. Again, they just brought it right to the property line and didn't push it a little
You know,
farther.
one thing, CDM Smith is not located in the town of Harwich or the town of Chatham, or, have an office in Yarmouth, but, they only use it as they need to. Whereas, folks like you are in these towns every day,
Yeah.
and they have a history at the towns. They know a little bit more about the details than the guys who are coming in and saying, okay, here's what a design is. So I think all that feedback is great.
Yeah, so I think those are just some things that we saw. And then, again, we're also looking at, our opinion is having a design plan early, to allow for homeowners to get a quote early so they can find out, how much it's gonna cost for the work, for them. It's kind of, when we were looking at the design book, we kind of felt like step 2 and step 3 could be kind of blended a little bit, so. So anyway, we looked at that, and then, and again, when it talks about the economy, the guidebook talks about the economy of scale and when contracting with the engineer and contractor, that's a good, truism there. And we thought, also see that it would be a coordinated effort with neighbors to have less disruption during the installation process, and then also help with a seasonal homeowner who may not be around for the stub connection or the process or the installation of the system itself. So,
And what we told all the homeowners, just to be very clear, that we, the town, are not in a position to say, go use this company or that company. It's up to you guys to do your own marketing and whatever else, outreach, whatever you're gonna do.
Yep.
And if people want to retain your services, they're gonna retain your service. They wanna go use Acme,
Yeah.
engineering company, they'll use Acme Engineering Company, whatever.
It's America,
But-
we know.
But we have always talked about if neighborhoods can get together,
Yeah.
both the design and the construction part, there could be some economies of scale. Just,
Right.
when you're in the neighborhood, it's a lot more efficient to keep going,
Keep going, correct, yeah. And
But
that's what we looked at too when we're doing our marketing and looking to gather neighbors together and say, look, we get neighbors, it's gonna be less expensive for them for our services, and then also
Sure.
we can provide other services. But
Uh,
that's what I think, other,
Sure, at the same time, I just want to be clear that we've had a couple folks come to us and say, well, wait, they tell me I gotta start today, that kind of thing, and we just want to make sure people understand. And it's their decision, not ours, but, first flow is, June of 2021.
Right.
And you back up from that, construction will start hopefully next spring or summer. And there's a process to go through. And certain streets will get done in a sequence. I mean, I'm just assuming the ones at the end will be the last ones to be done, but you never know. But if I was close to where the connection is to Chatham and moving up that way, I'd start getting more interested timeline than I would if I'm further out. But that's just me. People have to make their own decisions, and all we can do is provide the information. So, Maureen, you had a question, or?
Well, just to John's comment, John, where you said that people should have a design review before they determine the stub location. I certainly don't want to speak for our water department superintendent, but in the process of going over items in the book, particularly those step 2 and step 3, again, I hope Dan will forgive me if I misquote him, but he's pretty clear about the fact that for certainly a great many properties, they feel, both Megan and Dan intend to have workshops in the spring, and feel that the stubs on many properties stub locations can be determined without a full professional review. I don't want to go any deeper into that,
Yeah.
but I understand your opinion is that people should have a professional review, but I just want to make it clear that that's, not necessarily the position of this committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just so I understand, what you're trying to encourage is people to sign up and start the engineering design process now. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
And even though that the design of the collection system is not complete and things can change. For example, tonight I just heard there's a possibility of a low-pressure sewer system that may not be happening, that the small development of 6 houses could go from low pressure now to gravity. And if those persons had engaged your services prior to this potential change,
Yep.
then they're going to incur a needless expense because the design is completely changed.
Well, I won't get into the whole thing, but we told them, this is gonna be our price, and that's gonna be the price.
Regardless if there's any changes.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
That's their decision to make. I mean, that's, that's part of how you price your services.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
don't need to get into that. Okay, anything else?
No, that's it, again,
Hopefully you'll go to, or somebody from your firm will go to the October 3rd meeting?
I will be there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because, and I would guess, I mean, it's an open meeting, so the Hardin Lane team, I guess I'll call it, is gonna be invited to be there for 5 o'clock to talk about what they're gonna do with Hardin Lane. And it's an open meeting, so if you wanna show up, you're welcome to do that. You might just be sitting in the background, but then at 6 o'clock, the general meeting.
I'll be there 6, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you, thanks for coming.
Yeah. Glad I came.
Right. Any other questions or answers?
If we could talk about schedule for just 1 second.
Okay,
Okay, so first of all, now I think about this 5 o'clock, and I guess that will be informal, the 5 o'clock start. I posted for
Yes.
6 o'clock.
yeah.
Yeah.
It would just be, anybody from our team would just be a spectator at that
I
point.
see, okay.
That's fine.
First of all, let me start from the beginning. I want to say thank you to Peter for being the acting chair during a very busy month and guiding us through some difficult accomplishments. So thanks for that. And I understand Sharon may be back in the area, so it will be nice to see her. We don't have a meeting next Tuesday, so our next regularly scheduled meeting, other than, the Colebrook or whatever, would be the end of October. And I just wanted to mention, we had talked about having Heinz come in for a presentation of the water sampling program, so I don't want to lose sight of that, but I'm not trying to nail it down now.
I think we should try and do that in early November.
Well, that brings me to my question about November. So November 6th, which would be our next morning regularly scheduled meeting, is Election Day, and I don't know if that bothers anyone, but I think it might. Of course, we could always have it on a different day, that week, and we don't have to decide that now. So just so people are aware, that one might be moving since it's Election Day. And also in November, the 4th Thursday is Thanksgiving. So we'll have to be ready to pivot in terms of our scheduling for November.
Yeah, okay. I know in October I'll be out the 9th through the 22nd, so that you can still have meetings, but I mean, as far as October goes, at this point, since we got this thing done,
Right.
we have the design, the session next Wednesday with CDM Smith, I hope is gonna have a lot of information as to the design itself.
Yes.
I'm guessing out of that we're all gonna be able to walk away and say, okay, now I need to digest all this stuff, because people are gonna start asking us new questions or whatever, or maybe all the questions will be answered, I don't know. And we have the field trip to Colebrook on the 30th, so I think for October, we're probably covered.
Right.
I mean, I think that'd be good. And then if we can figure out, for me, I'd rather not meet on Election Day, but, we can decide that. But that first meeting in November, we could have Heinz come in and do the sampling program. And then we'll go from there.
I mean, if he's gonna come in and give us a presentation, I'd rather have us all be here
Yeah,
if we could, to
yeah.
save the trouble, so
Yeah.
we can, talk to the chair when she's settled
Yeah.
and pick an alternate date for
Yeah,
that.
that would be fine. So, we'll go from there.
And I don't think we'll meet on Thanksgiving.
No, but I also think in the interim, if you can start thinking about scope of work and specific deliverables for whatever this communication coordinator would do, let's start putting the stuff on a piece of paper and seeing what we like and don't like, and, what we want to have happen. Okay? And I guess in the interim, you can send those to me or you, whatever you want to do. Send them to me, and then I'll just put them together and see what we got. at some point, okay? Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
Moving second to adjourn, we're adjourned, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb.